Hello and welcome back to The Housing Advocate, the podcast of the Southern Utah Home Builders Association. My name is Stacy Young, and today I'm really pleased to be joined by our representative, Neil Walter. Thanks for coming in, Neil.
No, glad to be here. Thanks for having me this morning.
Yeah, you bet. Really looking forward to a good conversation with you about housing and anything else that kind of comes up along the way. Before we do, though, maybe to more deeply introduce yourself to our members and anybody else that doesn't know you well, could you just fill in a little bit of your biography for us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm from Southern Utah. Our family's been here since essentially the beginning. I like to joke about that a little bit. My mom's side of the family is Swiss settlers from Santa Clara, and then they came, and then her dad's side of the family came and settled Hurricane. And then my dad's mom's side of the family came to the Encampment Mall in St. George. And then I've got one of my great grandparents. I have one that came in the 1930s. He was the latecomer. Yeah, he came to Hall Rock. They drove truck when they were building the Zion Tunnel.
Okay.
And anyway, obviously met my grandmother and great story there. But so anyway, our family's been around Southern Utah for a very long time. Have a great love for the place. Went to Dixie High School, went to Dixie College, and then left for school for education and professional opportunities. Anyway, made my way back in 2005, which is, that's a whole story about timing. We can have a good conversation about that. But anyway, I've been involved in a number of things. So professionally, we own and operate real estate brokerages. I say we, me and my brothers. We own both NAI Excel Commercial Real Estate and ERA Brokers Consolidated. Most people are familiar with those organizations in the real estate community here, but we have 20 residential real estate offices with close to 1,000 real estate professionals.
Wow.
In 4 states, and then we have on our commercial real estate side, we have 5 offices in 3 states. We have a great organization, great people. We get to see a lot of real estate transactions, mostly from the brokerage side. We don't, we're not home builders, and we're not commercial real estate developers. We're not general contractors, mostly on the brokerage and the asset management side. So professionally, that's what I've done. In the meantime, I taught at Dixie State University for 9 years. I taught finance and economics and had a great time there. Really love our university and our education opportunities in the state of Utah. I think that's a really important piece. I think we're doing. I think we've got. If you want, we can have a great conversation about education. I know that's not the topic today, but anyway. And then finally, in terms of politics, so I ran for U.S. Congress in 2010. I lost the Republican nomination by 1 vote at the state convention.
Oh, wow.
It was great. It was actually a really great experience. And then, funny enough, I won a special election for Utah State Treasurer in 2015, but didn't get appointed by the governor because it was a special election. They have a runoff, or they have a race, but then you have to be appointed. So I didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't get appointed by the governor. So in 2022, when the opportunity came to run for House District 74, I said, I'll try again. And so, as they say, the third time was the charm. And anyway, I've been serving in the Utah legislature for 3 years. So I'll be in my 4th session this winter.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we've been really pleased to see you in that role, and I think you provide a great representation for Southern Utah generally, and on housing and related issues in particular. Maybe to backtrack a little, I think we have a little bit in common about some of that boomerang of leaving. I'm also from Southern Utah, but I'm from the other Southern Utah. I grew up in San Juan County, and
there's a few of you around here.
This is one place that we can kind of come to where there's a little bit more opportunity than where we grew up, but still has a similar feeling to us, that Colorado Plateau feeling of Southern Utah that we all enjoy. But I think Tell me a little bit more about that, about your stint outside Southern Utah. I think we have a little bit in common there.
Yeah, so I went to finish my undergraduate at BYU, went to graduate school in Pittsburgh, and then ended up in the oil and gas business. I was on a natural gas and power trade floor in Houston, Texas for a few years, and had honestly, I love the energy business. It's absolutely critical infrastructure that makes every aspect of our lives better. And we walk in rooms every day and turn the lights on and get to and from plate where we need to go in our cars, and literally everything just works. But the reality is it's an extraordinary industry, and it's extraordinarily bright people who have figured out how to make all that work. Yeah. And I love the fact that, to be frank, it works as well as we do. And we're extremely fortunate here in Utah because, take electricity, for example. We have, by some studies, the lowest cost electricity in the country. And that's something that's really important, I know, from a public policy standpoint. I worked on it a little bit. Colin Jack in District 75 has taken the lead on that. But literally, we have, I think it might be 73. I think I may have done that wrong. But anyway, affordable, reliable, dispatchable energy is a huge priority because our lives are so much better because of it. But anyway, I feel really lucky that I had a few years to learn some more about that aspect of our economy and how much of a positive impact it actually has on us.
Yeah, that scope's great. I think it's great to be back in Southern Utah, and at the same time, I went to professional school in St. Louis. I think our schools are in the same conference.
There you go.
Egghead 8 or whatever it's called.
A conference that nobody knows.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yep. But really good schools and great experience, and I really value that time as well on my.
It's one of the great successes for. I'll speak to Washington County, and we have a ways to go still, but for many generations, in fact, it may surprise people here in our community, but really until the mid 1970s. Washington County was smaller than Iron County. The economic engine of quote unquote Southern Utah or the southwest corner of the state was Iron County, not Washington County. And the reason why is because we exported our students, our youth, and they didn't have a way to get back. That's right. And it's taken a tremendous amount of work. And if you wonder why people care so deeply about our institution of higher education and our applied technology college, like those higher ed resources, they're so deeply cared about here. It's because without them, we export our youth, and they don't have a way to make their way back. And so I have a lot of friends that left and came back, and being able to have an opportunity to stay in the place that you love is, I think, a really important priority for those people that are here and love Southern Utah like we do.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. I think one of the places we've crossed paths over the years was at a Ivan's Housing Talk About. You may remember that a couple of years ago, and you did something that I have done once or twice myself, which was to poll the room about how long people have been here and welcome them. In that room, like most rooms, the numbers dropped way off once you got to 5, 10, 15 years. Very few folks had been here that long.
Yeah, I think what I did is I said, how many of you in the room? I think there was about 100 people, roughly. Right. Mm-hmm. And the talk about was the mayor just inviting the community to come and talk about difficult issues. And I think that one was a housing focused issue. But anyway, I asked the question. I said, how many of you have moved here since 2010? And it was a little more than half the room put their hands up in the air. And I said, how many of you have moved here since 2000? And I think that there was me and a city council member, just a handful of other people that had been here since before 2000. Yeah. And you're right. What I said was, welcome. We're glad to have you. We're like, this is a welcoming place. We're glad to have all of the people that have found reasons to love this community just like we do. But that conversation kind of shifted because I also said, I want to make sure that my kids have a place here. Yeah. They grew up here. They love it here. They're now in that age where they're, they're pursuing education. I have one that got married this year, and they're all trying to figure that out. And every one of them says, well, I want to be able to live in southern Utah, which really, I think, brings us to one of the most important policy priorities for the state. And it's one of the toughest issues to wrestle, which is housing affordability, housing attainability, the ability for for the next generation to have the opportunity to live and enjoy the place that they grew up. And so that's important for me. I realize that that means, like, if we say, hey, we're gonna make room for our kids, that means we have to have growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I realize that's a very difficult topic to talk about in some contexts, but I want a place for my kids. I know you want a place for your kids, and when I talk to my friends, they feel similarly, which means, like, we need to work through the issues. They're not easy. We're not going to do it all at once. Every year, in some regard, we're going to be talking about it. But it is, when you poll Utahns in general, if it's not the most important issue, it's one of the housing affordability, housing attainability is one of the most important concerns that they have in any survey.
Yeah, and I think part of what we're kind of tugging at is this issue that it's frankly a problem you want to have in the sense that is a reflection of a growing and dynamic location. Being from San Juan County, I very much see both sides of this coin, and I feel like, for folks that genuinely just do not want change, and if they're really interested in a very static place, there's lots of places in Utah that are very scenic, have a great quality of life, and also are stagnant. And so, candidly, if people want that, they can opt for that. That's not our conditions in Washington County. We have a very dynamic economy and growing economy that does create the opportunity for our future generations of our children to stay here, where that's a fortunate position to be in. Not every place has that. And so, on the bright side, trying to solve housing is what you do want to have, as opposed to figuring out how you're going to manage decline, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're bringing up a really important topic. Is staying exactly the same is the only not feasible option. Right. There are places across the country and in Utah where there's declining population, and that's a huge economic challenge and burden. And so, that's definitely a more difficult problem. Even though growth is challenging, that's a more difficult problem. I think you've properly characterized it. If we said, hey, well, why is it that we're growing in southern Utah? It's because this is a great place and people want to come here, and we should acknowledge that genuinely is a compliment, right? It means we're doing a lot of things right, but at the same time, we have to work through the challenges that come with that, and that takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of engaged stakeholders at the table, working on this issue year in and year out. And my guess is we've been working and talking about these kinds of issues for decades, and we'll be talking about them in the decades to come.
Yeah, and your career trajectory is similar to my own, also in sort of the having been on the roller coaster, ups and downs a couple of times now. We've been at this long enough to have experienced highs and lows and everything in between. But your point, I think a lot of what has allowed us to be dynamic and growing here are some of these really important planks, like the education piece, like the healthcare. So we have the great scenery, but we've also got these other great sort of institutional, foundational elements that not everybody has.
We've always had outdoor recreation, right? But as the healthcare landscape changed, credit Intermountain Health for their investment in the River Road campus. It transformed healthcare in our community, which really made it possible for people who would like to live here that maybe couldn't have otherwise because of the healthcare options. And so I think we have to credit that. We have to credit the efforts on the education side, both in our K through 12 public education efforts. Our school district, you talk about trying to manage growth. They have a very difficult challenge keeping up with the growing dynamics as they as our community has in many ways grown up, but particularly moving from, we've spent a lot of time on this the last few years, but the university moving from what was a 2-year state college when I attended, where there was no opportunity to earn a bachelor's degree or any other programs, to getting in 2000 just a couple of 4-year degrees, to moving to a 4-year degree granting program officially, and then to a university, right? Like, that evolution has been really critical. And then similarly for Dixie Technical College, for them to be able to expand and grow and evolve. When I was in school, the thought was, well, all they do is diesel mechanics, right? Because they were kind of combined with the university at the time. But all they do is diesel mechanics. But now when you look at the range of programs from drafting and graphic design and all kinds of technology, like the educational opportunities, both in very hands-on trade-related fields, but also in human capital-related, like, they're exploding, and that's great for our community. Those investments are really, really important and great. They're fantastic for our community. Yeah,
we love them as an association. We've got an aging workforce, and nationally, home building and construction generally struggles for labor. Locally, we're in a much better place than average, and it has a lot of that is down to the trade school and the relationships across the line between their institution and the industry. They're super nimble and responsive, are always asking us, what do you need? We only want to build something out that is going to be useful, and if it's useful, we will build it out.
So I've got a couple of, I know that today our focus isn't education, but it's critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like, if we just talk about building homes, like, this is critical infrastructure. So I chair the education committee in the House of Representatives, and then for the past couple of years I've been the vice chair of higher education appropriations. And I can tell you that the state is making huge investments in and cares deeply about our educational opportunities in our community here in Washington County. And if we talk specifically about Dixie Technical College, there's some incredible resources that they're making available to our youth that will prepare them so that they have a range of opportunities. And then you're talking about, which I think is really important, you look at our employers, and if we even just talk specifically about home building in this case, there's a skill set that we have to develop. Right. And that technical college at Tech Ridge is really instrumental in bridging between, I got a high school diploma and I want to get into the workforce, and I want to be a contributor to, I have the skills where I can show up on a job site and get mentored and learn to really become very, very, very skilled at this work that happens.
Yeah. And now with the school district, we've got the Career Tech High School, which is a fantastic addition.
Great addition. And big shout out to our Washington County School District for making that unique opportunity available. In fact, they're ahead. The state of Utah created this Catalyst program and is really trying to develop opportunities for youth to build skills earlier, like in high school. Mm-hmm. Credit to Washington County School District for being out in front of that with the career technical program there. Yeah,
it's really great. Yeah, we're starting to see a kind of a whole the whole spectrum there between the high school, Dixie Technical College, and then in the works, it's earlier in the process, but we're trying to get a construction management program at the university established as well, so you can kind of hit every sort of age and skill level and interest for that. So yeah, it's a really important part of our ecosystem locally.
Well, maybe we ought to talk about a couple of the key pieces of legislation from last year that I think are have made an impact for where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's talk housing. I think we could both talk about other stuff for easily for the length that I've got you. But yeah, shift into housing. Maybe let's touch on that. What are one or two things that happened last year that you'd like to highlight? I know one in particular that I know our members had a lot of interest in.
So let's talk about the one that I planned, and then we talk about the one that was maybe unplanned. The one that we planned, there was a number of pieces of legislation that are related to housing. One of the things that I was really focused on was specifically HOAs. This last session, the session before, we ran a bill that I think your members are very well aware of, which essentially said once a municipality or a county issues a building permit, they can't amend or rescind the building permit. What we wanted to do is just say once that approval has been granted, then you can rely on that. If you're the general contractor and you pulled that permit, you can rely on that. That was 2 years ago. This last year, one of the issues that I was working on was related to homeowners associations and just making sure that the balance between the homeowners and I'm going to characterize it this way, but the management company, that there was some balance there to try and help keep the cost of housing in a homeowners association relatively affordable. And so we were focusing on, the maximum amount that could be assessed in fees. Let me give you a couple of funny examples. We had one homeowners association that was charging 360% annual interest on their HOA if you missed an HOA fee.
Wow.
And we said, look, that you can't do that. That's excessive.
That's extreme,
right?
Yes.
So we don't want HOAs using a fee policy like that to drive somebody out of their house. Right? Because you can't catch up. So we were looking at fees. We were looking at we created a Office of the Ombudsman, which will deal with only violations of state law. So there's a dispute process or dispute appeal process there. But one of the big things we talked a lot about, I think it's interesting to your members, we talked a lot about reinvestment fees and association transfer fees. So reinvestment fees are when I sell my property, there's money that goes back into the association for the benefit of the members, right? A transfer fee is I'm being charged a fee that essentially goes to the management company for costs associated with the transfer. So what we did is we tried to separate those two, and we said, look, if it's a reinvestment fee, they have to be adopted either by the declarant or they have to be adopted in a vote by the members. And those funds have to stay for the benefit of the membership. They can't go to the management company. If you're going to charge the members for an association transfer fee, it needs to be for the benefit of the members, right? That was the goal. And then the association transfer fee, we said, look, it's okay for the management company to get to charge for the costs associated with the transfer, but in the statute, what we put in there was reasonable. We're seeing some association transfer fees now that are still higher than what the title company is charging for the cost of the transfer. It seems hard for me to justify that the association management company is more impacted by the transfer, that's more burden to them than the title company who's facilitating it. So, the key there is reasonable. So it was an important issue just because of how homeowners associations work. And I know a lot of your members are either building in homeowners associations or when they're developing neighborhoods that either by their choice because of shared amenities or by a requirement from a municipality, they're in an HOA. And so what we're trying to do there is just really simply make sure that we're looking out for the long run member interests in those neighborhoods. So that was the one that was planned, and spent a lot of time working on that. Had a lot of debate about it, but got to a very, very good place with at least in terms of the way the votes went. The one that was unplanned was just a really, really challenging situation where one of your members wanted to hold a home that they were building open for the parade, and the municipalities for the parade, Southern Utah Parade of Homes, and the municipality said no. And that set up, I think, a really important question about a principle.
Right.
Does a homeowner have the right to hold their house open for essentially the process of selling and marketing the home? And what we jumped in, and you can jump in here, but what we did is we tried to work it out with the municipality, and that didn't work out. So what we ended up doing is passing a law that said, if you're a general contractor, if you're an architect, if you're a real estate professional, if you're a homeowner, a homeowner fundamentally has a right to hold their home open for the process of marketing or selling their home. It didn't give anybody permission to violate street parking ordinances or occupancy requirements.
Right.
Like, it didn't waive any of those things. It just said
Right.
that you can't create a process to prevent somebody from holding their home open.
Yeah. I think, first of all, we could not have appreciated more your willingness to take this up, because it was unplanned. It was not something that we were looking to do. It was kind of an issue that was dropped onto our plates, and in a legislative session where time is incredibly precious, that you were willing to take that on was so deeply appreciated. And you're exactly right. I think it did end up sort of uncovering this little wrinkle of how, there really ought to be some level of respect for that, an individual owner's ability to market and sell their property. Again, acknowledging the constraints still of standard nuisance law, all that's
That's right.
still
You can't
going
go
to apply.
park on the sidewalks or block the street or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think it came out just fine. Like, in terms of the event itself, the concerns, I think in the end the builder was able to accommodate all of
It was really remarkable, because I know the parade is a huge part of huge effort by the Southern Utah Home Builders Association, but literally at the 12th hour it got resolved, and they were able to get opened there in Rockville, which was great. But it was one of those things. There's a lot of bills, and sometimes people complain about the number of bills. I complain about the number of bills, right? But then I start thinking, well, is that a bill that we would have pulled?
Right.
And the answer is we probably didn't really need that bill, except for there was somebody that felt they had the right to say, no, you can't hold your home open.
Right.
And I think that when those types of situations come up, we have an obligation to clarify and say, no, there's a private property right here that we want to protect, and the interests of that homeowner are worth fighting for in this context. And that was really the principle that we were clarifying in the context of, what authority does a municipality have? What authority does a county have? What authority, frankly, does a homeowner have? We wanted to clarify, like, there's a private property right interest there that's worth protecting. Yeah,
agreed. So maybe shifting more forward-looking, still talking housing, maybe just talk about where, I think we're in a different market conditions than they're always changing, and certainly they're different than they were a few years ago. Maybe talk about where you see us in terms of the market, and how that may relate to how you see legislation.
I think it's important that we continue to look forward. So I appreciate that question. One of the biggest reservations that I have right now is for the 3 years that I've been in the session, every session there's been a huge focus on public policy to try and specifically address housing affordability, housing attainability. I'm starting to I've always had concerns that we have to be very careful about how state and local governments try and manage this market issue, because what happens is they can inadvertently make the cycle pro-cyclical, meaning the peaks that we're trying to avoid higher.
Gassed up even more. Yeah.
That's right. And the troughs even lower, right? Nobody wants to go through 2008 again. And so I've mentioned this example in a couple of contexts, but on one hand, the state's saying, hey, we want housing affordability, housing attainability. But then on the other hand, the state is investing so much in roads, infrastructure, buildings, et cetera, that we're competing for the same resources.
Right. Same inputs, yeah.
The same resources, whether it's concrete or asphalt or lumber or other aggregates, building materials. We're competing for a lot of those same resources, which is making it hard for essentially the cost to work its way through the system. So right now, particularly as we move forward, one of the things I'm advocating to my colleagues in the House of Representatives is please be very, very careful with public policy initiatives where there's already I don't want to say a correction, but prices have really stabilized, and there's a lot of affordable options out there, both in existing inventory and in new construction. And so we need to be careful about how we manage public policy, because we may not actually be getting the intended outcomes. We may be 1, 2, 3 years behind,
right,
and we could make things worse. We need to be very careful about that.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. Yeah, there's always that risk of, it's almost kind of a whipsaw effect, right? That you exacerbate the highs and lows because of the lag and the way the public sector can sort of distort the cost of inputs and so forth. So kind of thinking about that, I think I agree with that assessment entirely. I think another component to it is more durable, a little more almost permanent feeling at times, which is some of the kind of structural elements around just the way we do zoning in America. This is not a uniquely Utah problem. The way we do zoning and land use and permitting and all the process has really become really something over the recent decades, and so I think that still remains the area that I feel like there's need for action, but boy, it's difficult. How do you see that piece of it?
I wish I had a solution, an easy solution, that if we were to run policy A, B, or C, or some combination, then we would have a much better outcome. It's really tricky because I recognize our local governments, our municipalities, and our county. We have good people that are doing the best they can to try and make good decisions, and they're trying to balance the interests of existing residents and housing affordability issues and impacts for new development. They're trying to balance all those things, and at the same time, our home builders and our development community is feeling like it's just getting harder and harder and harder to get a unit delivered.
Right.
And it's a real bind, because I've spent a lot of time with our municipalities and with the League of Cities and Towns, and I understand. I can see their perspective,
sure,
but I also see the other perspective. And frankly have a lot of experience with trying to move entitlements through an approval process, and it's really, really, really difficult. And I think that we have to keep, one of the most important things, I think we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep those lines of communication open.
Yeah.
Our industry professionals and our municipalities, we just need to keep talking and explaining where we're having issues and where we're having challenges, and try and work together. That being said, there's no question that the cost of entitlements and permitting it's a big cost.
Yeah.
And mostly the cost, I think that people start measuring impact fees, and they start measuring engineer and architect's time and et cetera. But the biggest cost might be time.
100%.
If I have to sit and hold an asset, I've got lots of capital deployed, and it takes me a long time, the interest on that is just clicking. And that might be the large, we could probably have a very interesting debate about it, but that might be the largest single cost. And so what's happening is people say, well, land is so expensive. Land is expensive because there's not a lot of it. And if you want land that's entitled properly that you can actually build on, there's even less of that.
Right.
and that price just keeps moving, and then that drives through the whole system. I've talked a lot here, but one comment, like we do business in Texas. We have offices in San Antonio, Austin, in that area. And it's really remarkable, right? Because you can look at a house there, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. You can look at the same house here, and the price is $300,000 difference.
Yeah.
And the cost difference is all in land, permitting, and entitlements.
Right.
Right. It's very, very interesting scenario.
Yeah, it's a great contrast. A few things in response to that. You really highlighted a ton of stuff that really is kind of near and dear to my heart. Because I completely agree. I think what you can account for as direct costs is very much in the minority of the true cost of it, and that it is both the time value of that money, but also the risk premium that you have to then assign to a given project because it's so uncertain, it's so lengthy. To tying that to one of your earlier points, if you know you've got 2 years to get from point A to point B, you don't even know what market you're going to be delivering that into, and so
2 years is probably the shortest possible absorption time frame you can plan for.
And so there's so much guesswork, and it ends up having that whipsaw effect as well, because you're constantly doing so much guesswork, and again, truly in just purely financial terms, there's going to be a considerable risk premium that you're going to have to apply to that versus other opportunities for your money, right? And so I think that's a profound piece that's really hard to discuss with most people. It's real because it's largely invisible to so many folks, but it is kind of the game. That is really what we're talking about in terms of being able to build a more supple means of delivering homes.
I think one of the other real challenges that these are hard discussions, right? They're hard conversations, and that's why I say it's so important for those lines of communication be open. But here's one other one that's really challenging. If what our goal is housing affordability, housing attainability, right? People to be able to afford to have a place to live. If we don't build, that's the most expensive situation.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, take Park City for an example, right? What's happening is the marginal buyer is somebody who has more disposable income than you or I or our residents. And so what happens is they're able to bid that price up. Mm-hmm. And so really one of the hardest dynamics to manage is in a place that's desirable where people are coming. If we don't find some way to add inventory, add supply over time, then fundamentally what happens is the cost of housing here will move like Park City, like Southern California, mm-hmm. and that's an even worse challenge. I shouldn't say worse, a more difficult challenge than the ones that we're trying to deal with now. So. Yeah. I know some folks say, "Hey, we just need to do nothing." The answer is, like, we can't do nothing.
Yeah,
that's gonna put us even in a more difficult challenge than the ones that we're facing. So
no, you're exactly right. Yeah, just more money chasing less goods is sort of fundamentally. And frankly, we had kind of a natural experiment of that during COVID, and it wasn't just housing. We saw it with toilet paper. We saw it with everything, and so. Those same principles apply to housing as they do other parts of our economy. And I think our position as the association is that we would like housing to more closely resemble other markets that are highly differentiated, highly competitive. Everybody wins. The consumer wins, the producer
give people choice,
fine.
And let them find the solution that works for them. I think that's a great insight. I think it's a great comment.
Yeah, and I think also your comparison to Texas is apt as well. I was looking at something the other day, and Austin is the rare unicorn that has been on the receiving end of the kinds of migration, the explosive growth that we're familiar with, that has managed to bend the curve of their housing costs. They're down year over year by like really meaningful amounts, and so again, it really does.
People
come down to
don't
that.
know this, but part of the reason why is they have this is unbelievable. Okay, Austin is a smaller market than Salt Lake City or Las Vegas. Salt Lake City and Las Vegas have roughly 10,000 apartments that are under construction, right? Delivered last year. They have 40,000 apartments.
Yep.
So when you look at the supply, like it's a massive amount of supply. And partly what's happening in our community is people are saying, we want a better balance, right? If we said, hey, we're going to build proportionally, add that kind of supply in this market, it wouldn't be well received.
People would they would and do vapor lock over that.
That's right.
Yeah, I do think we could stand a few more projects of scale because to your point, that scale is what really makes a dent quickly in an issue. But yeah, we don't have to open it full throttle. We can.
Well, again, I think that balance between what our residents and what our municipalities are doing and what our development community is. Would like. I think that there's definitely tension there, but that balance is what keeps us from essentially saying in Texas, like for example in Texas, like just go build as fast as you can, as much as you can.
Yeah, let her rip. Yeah. No, I think that's great, and I think broadly that is something that's just fairly distinctive about Utah. We have much more lines of open communication between the different stakeholders in this. I think our land use task force that we have in the state that kind of works on these issues kind of all year is unique. I don't know of another state that has anything like that. We have our ombudsman's office is also another thing that's unique to Utah, and so we have a lot of mechanisms to work through these things in a more constructive way. It takes a little longer, but I am confident that our housing challenges are more of a temporary thing than a permanent one like we see in the coastal cities and so on. But so yeah, maybe that's I talked to you all day, Neil, but in respect to your time, maybe we'll kind of wind it up there. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to tag on before we wrap it up.
I think I'd like to just recognize that the Southern Utah Home Builders Association, the Utah Home Builders Association are great advocates for our housing community. And I think that that's important distinction, not just for home builders, but they're advocates for housing. They're highly engaged in Utah public policy. They have a great voice. They have a strong voice at the Utah State Capitol, and I appreciate the efforts from our home builders to advocate for housing in the state of Utah, and I think they've been highly effective at that. And I think it's important that your members know that. Sometimes when you're part of an association and they're working, but you're not sure really what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Just as somebody who's in those trenches, I see them in many, many contexts advocating for your members and for the customers, the clients who buy homes from your members. And I just think it's important that they recognize how hard the Home Builders Association, both at the state and here in the Southern Utah, is working to advance those interests, and they should have confidence in that.
I really appreciate that, Neil, and thanks again for coming in and doing
glad
this.
to be here.
Looking forward to more conversations with you off mic. Thanks also to the folks who've tuned in. We hope you'll like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We'll see you in the next one.